My name is Nell Harkness. I am 44 years old, and I have repaired watches at 2 benches on Cross Street for 17 years. I take things apart for a living. In 17 years, I have never once put a thing back together wrong, and I want that on the record before I tell you the rest of it. On a Friday night in October, we ate the last dinner in my mother's house on Bell Hill Road, off paper plates. The table was already half covered in newsprint and packing paper, because the whole contents of that house were going to the Grange-hall in the morning to be sold. My grandmother's watch case was sitting on the table. Mahogany hinged 12 fitted recesses in green velvet and empty. It has been empty since 2011. My sister picked it up, turned it over to look for a lot tag, and set it to the table rather than to me, which is how everything in my family gets said. Well, she sold them. That was her choice. 14 years in a sentence over a paper plate. I did not argue. I have not argued with Corinne since our father's funeral, and I do not intend to start at 44. I waited until she set the case down and I said, "What lot number did they give it?" She said 92. She said it like I was asking what something was worth. I was not asking what it was worth. I already knew what everything in that house was worth, down to the sideboard, and there was exactly one lot in that sale I could not stop thinking about, and it was not lot 92. Welcome back to Thistlegate Estate, where the overlooked finally claim what's theirs. Ashcroft is a town of about 2,600 people in Merrow County, New Hampshire. White clapboard, a grange-hall that does the pancake breakfast and the town meeting, and twice a year, an estate auction. Leaf peepers for 3 weeks in October, and then nothing until the sugar house is open. My shop is on Cross Street between the insurance office and a place that has been going out of business since 2014. 2 benches. Mine, and one I keep set up for a boy from the vocational school who comes Tuesdays and Thursdays and is better at this than I was at his age. I fix watches. Mostly I fix cheap watches that belonged to somebody's father, which is not the same trade as selling expensive ones, and I want to be clear about that. About 1/3 of what comes across my bench is worth less than what I charge, and I tell people so, and about half of them tell me to fix it anyway. The other thing about this trade is that almost nobody comes in happy. A watch arrives at my bench because it stopped, and it usually stopped a good while ago, and the person carrying it in has been meaning to do this since a funeral. I have had grown men cry at that counter over a Timex, so I have a great deal of practice at holding still while somebody works out what they actually want to say. It is the most useful thing I know how to do. It is also, I have come think, that the reason I am 44 years old and have never once said the thing in this story out loud. Here is the one thing you need to know about the work before the rest of this will land. A movement that has been over-oiled runs beautifully for about a year. That is the part nobody tells you. Somebody's uncle gets at it with a can of 3-in-1 because it was running slow, and it comes back to life, and it keeps beautiful time. And it is grinding itself apart the entire time it is doing that. You do not see it until you open it. My mother is Adele Harkness. She is 71, and as of the 1st of November, she lives at Merrow House, the assisted living out past the fairgrounds. The money for that is why the Bell Hill Roadhouse had to go. My father was Emery Harkness. He ran the town's water department for 22 years, and he died in July of 2011, and I am going to come back to the spring before that. I am the middle one. Corinne is 47 and does the books for 2 dental practices and has done the paperwork for this family since she was about 19. A mainspring holds its tension for years without once complaining about it. So does my sister. Royce is 39. He is in Concord. He is kind, and he is not going to be any help to anybody, which he would tell you himself. And on the sideboard in that dining room for 14 years, there has been an empty mahogany watch case. My grandmother had 12 watches in it. Not a fortune. 6 pocket watches, 3 of them decent, and some wristwatches from the 50s. She left the case and everything in it to me in 1998 because I was the one who wound them up, and nobody in that family has ever disputed that they were mine. My mother kept the empty case on the sideboard anyway. Dusted around it. Never opened it, not once, not while I was in the room. Tell me where you're listening from. By the way, I like knowing whose kitchen this is going in. Rung 1 is not an event. It is a sentence, and I have heard it in some form probably 200 times. Nell sold Grandma's watches. It gets said at weddings. It got said at my nephew's christening. It gets said kindly, mostly, which is the part that took me years to understand. Nobody in my family says it to hurt me. It is said in the same tone people use about a bad back. It is simply a known fact about Nell. The fact is that she is the one who let the family's one beautiful thing go to a dealer and did not even keep one and never said why. I have a list in my head of where it has been said. My cousin's wedding at the Elks in 2016, at the table by an aunt who meant nothing at all by it. My nephew's christening, twice at Christmas. Once at the dedication of my own father's headstone, which I will admit I have not entirely got over. Nobody has ever once asked me why. I let it be true for 14 years. If you have ever let a thing be believed about you because correcting it would cost somebody else more than it cost you, you know that it does not feel noble at the time. It feels like a stone in your shoe that you have decided not mention. And the longer you go without mentioning it, the stranger it would be to bring it up until one day, the not mentioning is the thing everybody knows about you. Rung 2 is the story they tell instead. In the spring of 2011, my father had been in Concord and then in a rehab facility in Laconia for 4 months, and the bills that were not covered came to $38,900. That is the number. I have never once been unsure of it. My mother was going to lose the house. Not eventually, that summer. She had the letters on the kitchen table in a stack with a rubber band around them, and she had stopped opening the new ones. I know exactly what was in that stack because I read the whole thing at that table one Sunday in February while she was at church. 2 were from a collection agency the hospital had sold the account to. 1 was from the mortgage company because she had missed 4 payments trying to keep up with everything else, and it used the word acceleration, which I had to go home and look up. And 1 was from a lawyer in Manchester for the rehab facility, and that one used the word lien, a lien on the Bell Hill Road house. My father was still alive in a bed in Laconia, and there was a letter on his own kitchen table about attaching his house. My mother had no assets. There was almost no equity in that house because they had refinanced twice in the 90s to keep the roof on it. Her income was going to be his pension and whatever the insurance did not fight her about, and she was 56 years old. And then in March, Amos Coyne paid it. Amos was my father's oldest friend. They were at Ashcroft Regional together in 1968. He surveyed half this county for 30 years. He was a widower with no children, and he had a habit of turning up on your porch with something you had mentioned needing 3 weeks earlier. He came to the house on a Tuesday and told my mother it was handled and would not discuss it and never discussed it again for 14 years. That is the story. It gets told at every wedding and every funeral in this family. My mother has told it to people at the grocery store. Royce named his boy Amos for a middle name, and I have never once corrected it. Rung 3 was in April, and it is where I started to be afraid without knowing what of. Amos died on the 9th. 91 at home, which is what he wanted. Half the county came. The reception was in the grange-hall. On the long table was a church supper casserole, situation 9. People's idea of what a family needs, and none of it what anybody actually wants to eat. That is roughly how this part of the world handles a death. My mother stood next to me holding a paper cup, and she said he never wanted a word of thanks, not one word. In 14 years, he never so much as let me bring it up. And she said it to me, looking at me, with that particular gentleness she uses when she thinks she is being generous about something. I said he was a good man, which is true. Then I went out to the parking lot and sat in my truck for about 20 minutes with my hands on the wheel, and then I drove home without going back in. Here is what I was actually doing in that truck, and I have never said it out loud to anybody in my family. I was working out whether he had thrown the letter away. 14 years I had assumed he had. A man does not keep a piece of paper that makes him a liar. He had no wife to explain it to, and no children to leave it to. There was no earthly reason for that note to still exist, and I had built a fair amount of my life on the assumption that it did not. I sat there and I could not make myself certain of it, and then I decided I was being morbid at a funeral, which is a thing anybody can talk themselves into. Corinne noticed I left early. Corinne notices everything and files it. Rung 4 was September, and it is the one that has paper attached to it. My mother was going into Marrow House on the 1st of November. The house had to sell, and the contents had to go, and Corinne drew up how the proceeds would be divided. Corinne has done the paperwork for this family since she was 19, and nobody has ever asked her not to. She emailed it to Royce and to me on a Sunday night. It was a spreadsheet and a 2-page memorandum, and it was good work. Corinne is good at this. The house had an accepted offer, the closing was set for the 12th day, and the net proceeds after the realtor and the payoff were in bold at the top. Out of that, the deposit and the first 18 months at Marrow House into an account at the lawyer's office in Concord, which she called the Care Fund. Then the contents which Dow & Sons had appraised at the end of August, walking that house with a clipboard while my mother sat out on the porch and would not watch. Then the division of whatever was left. 3 columns: Adele's Care Fund, Royce, Corinne. There was a note at the bottom in the same flat font as everything else that said, per mom, Nell's share was taken in 2011. I read that sentence about 9 times. I want to be fair, and being fair is the hardest part of telling this. My mother did believe that. She has believed for 14 years that I took 12 watches that were legally mine and turned them into money and kept it, at the exact moment this family was drowning. And she has never once said a hard word to me about it. She just quietly took it off the books. That is the thing about my family. Nobody shouts. They adjust the ledger and hand it to you. If you have ever been handed a document with your own absence in it, you know it is not about the money. It is that somebody sat down in a chair with a pen and did the arithmetic that leaves you out and then went to bed. Comment adjusted if you know exactly what I mean. And here is the last thing, and it is the reason I am telling you all of this. I called Corinne about the division on the Monday. We got about 90 seconds into it before it stopped being about the division. I said the note at the bottom was not accurate. She said it was what Mom wanted. I said I would like to hear that from Mom. She said Mom was 71 and moving into assisted living in 6 weeks. And did I really want to do this now? That is the whole argument. It is the same one every time, and it works every time because she is not wrong about the timing. Corinne has never once been wrong about the timing in 20 years. I asked her what the contents had been appraised at. She told me. I asked her what my grandmother's watches had been appraised at in 1998, when they went into the estate inventory after my grandmother died, because I knew she would not know. She said, "Why would I know that?" I said no reason. I said I was asking. And then, near the end, as flat as I could make it, I asked her whether Amos Coyne's effects were going into the same sale as ours. There was a pause on the line. She said, "Why? Is there something of his you want?" I said no. I said the auction house had told Mother they were combining 2 estates, and I was asking a question. I hung up, and I sat in my shop with the light off for a while. Amos Coyne died on the 9th of April, and his effects went into the same sale as ours, and it took me until the middle of October to understand why that mattered. The last dinner was that Friday, 24th. I want you to see that room. Everything off the walls. The rectangles on the wallpaper where the pictures had been lighter than the rest of it. That is a thing that will take the legs out from under you if you are not ready for it. Boxes to the ceiling in the front hall with Corinne's handwriting on them. Newsprint on the dining table, and the good dishes already gone to the hall, so we ate off paper. Royce brought a pizza from the place on the green. My mother said grace, which she has not done since my father died. There were 4 of us. Corinne, Royce, my mother, me. Corinne's husband was outside on the phone for most of it. And the watch case was on the table because Corinne had brought it in from the sideboard to get a lot tag on it. She was doing lot tags all through dinner. That is not cruelty, it is just Corinne. There were 900 things in that house, and the truck came at 7 in the morning. She also said between one tag and the next that the lawyer wanted the division signed before the closing so it could go in the file with Mom's new will. My mother said she did not care to talk about wills at supper, and Corinne said that was fine and wrote another tag. She picked up the case and turned it over to find where the tag would sit and opened it and looked at 12 empty velvet recesses. And she said it. To the table. In the same tone she had been using about the sideboard and the dish barrels. Well, she sold them. That was her choice. Nobody said anything. Royce looked at his pizza. Royce is 39 years old, and he looked at his pizza. I have thought about that more than about anything Corinne said. Corinne has never once pretended to be on my side. My brother has, at every family thing, for 14 years always afterward, and always privately. He has said, "You know that's not fair to me," in about 9 parking lots. He has never said it in a room. I do not think he is a coward. I think he learned the same thing I learned in that house. The cost of saying it out loud is paid by whoever says it. It is paid immediately, and nothing changes. He priced it and declined. I priced it and declined for 14 years about something considerably larger. We are the same, my brother and me. That is the thing I did not want to know. And then my mother did the thing that was worse than either of them. She reached over and she patted my hand and she said, "It's all right, Nellie. It was yours to sell." It was yours to sell. She meant it kindly. She has meant it kindly for 14 years. That sentence is my mother telling a room full of people that she has forgiven me for something which requires everybody in the room to agree there was something forgive. Mud season is the honest part of the year up here. Everything that was frozen solid all winter turns to something you can sink a truck in, and then in May it firms up and everybody agrees it was always solid. My family does that with a subject instead of a road. I sat there with my hands in my lap and did the arithmetic I always do. What does it cost her if I say it, and what does it cost me if I do not? For 14 years, that has come out the same way. My mother is 71, and she has spent a third of her life grateful to a dead man. If I take that away from her, I do not get to give her anything in its place. There is no version where she hears it and is glad. So I did what I have done at every one of these tables since 2011. I said, "What lot number did they give it?" Corinne checked her sheet and said, 92. And I said thank you, and I helped carry the barrels out to Royce's truck, and I drove home. I did not argue at that table. I went home and I sat down at my own bench with the light on, and I opened the auction house's website. Doe & Sons runs the fall sale at the Grange every year. Pearlie Dow is about 60, and his father did it before him, and the online catalog goes up 10 days ahead with a photograph of every lot. It was 11 at night. I was going to look at lot 92 and see what they had written about my grandmother's case, and that is the entire reason I opened it. 2 estates in that sale. Harkness Bell Hill Road, Coin Depot Street. I went through the coin lots first. I do not have a good reason for that. He had been dead 6 months. I had sat in my truck in a parking lot instead of going back into that reception, and I suppose I wanted to see what a man's life gets cataloged as. Lot 211 surveying instruments. Lot 212 3 rifles. Lot 213 assorted household. Lot 214 family Bible coins circa 1890 with correspondence. There were 2 photographs. The first was the Bible closed on a gray cloth with a ruler beside it for scale. The second one was the Bible open to the back flyleaf so a bidder could see the condition of the binding. And tucked into the gutter, photographed at an angle half of it visible, was a folded piece of paper with handwriting on it. I knew the handwriting. I have known it my whole life. It is mine. I wrote that letter on the 11th of March 2011 at this bench. I gave it to Amos Coyne with a bank draft the next morning. What it says is, "Amos, this is all of it. Please tell her it came from you. If she knows it was me, she will not take it and she will lose the house. I am asking you to lie to my mother and I am sorry. N.H." He kept it. 91 years old and no children. Out of everything he could have thrown away in 14 years, he kept the note that made him a liar, folded into the back of the Bible with his mother's name in the front of it. I sat at my bench for a long time. Now I want to slow this down because what happened next is the part people get wrong afterward. They assume I saw an opportunity. I did not see an opportunity. I saw a catastrophe. That letter going into a public room does not vindicate me. Not first. First, it tells my mother, in front of 40 people at a grange-hall on a Saturday morning, that the story she has told at every wedding for 14 years is a lie. One her daughter arranged, that the man she has been grateful to was in on it, and that she cannot ask him about it because he is dead. I have watched my mother be embarrassed in public exactly once in 1994, and I have never forgotten it, so I did not want to win. I wanted that lot out of that sale. I called Dow and Sons at 9 the next morning. Pearly Dow was decent about it and completely immovable, and everything he said was correct. The consignor of the coin estate is the estate. The executor is a lawyer in Concord who never met Amos. The catalog was published, the lot was photographed, but absentee bids were already in on the coin lots because there were people who wanted the surveying instruments. He said if I could tell him the correspondence was mine and put that in writing, he could take it up with the executor and possibly withdraw the lot. And there it is. To get that letter out of the sale, I had to put in writing to a man who does the pancake breakfast with my mother exactly what the letter was. I said I would call him back. If you have ever had exactly one move available and it costs the one thing you were trying to protect, you know what that morning felt like. There is no clever version. You just sit there with the phone in your hand and understand that you are going to have to pick. So I picked the stupid one. I registered to bid. I looked at what I had. The shop account had rent and the boys' stipend and a parts order in it. What I had loose was $1, $100, $1,100 on a Bible with no auction value at all. Family Bibles do not sell. They go for $40, $60, and half the time they do not sell at all, and the auctioneer bundles them into the next box lot. There was no reason on earth for that lot to go past $100. Let me say this to every one of you who has ever tried to protect somebody from a thing you did for them. You are allowed to want it to stay quiet. That is not the same as being ashamed of it, and it took me until I was 44 to learn the difference. But you should know going in that a secret you are keeping for somebody else's comfort is being stored somewhere you do not control. Mine was in a dead man's Bible in a barn behind a grange-hall, in a cardboard flat with a number on it. I had $1, $100, and a bidder number. Corinne had the whole rest of the room. The grange-hall on a Saturday in late October is about 110 folding chairs, a coffee urn, and everybody you have ever met. My mother sat in the second row with her pocketbook on her knees. Corinne sat next to her with her sheet. Royce came late and stood at the back with the other men who stand at the back. I sat on the aisle 7 rows back with a white paddle with 46 on it. Pearly Dow started at 9 and he is fast. Harkness lots first because ours was the bigger estate. The sideboard went for $200. My grandmother's case, lot 92, went to a dealer from Portsmouth for $85, and my mother's chin came up when it did. The coin lots started a little after 11. The surveying instruments did well. The rifles took a while. Lot 213, assorted household, went in a box. And Pearly Dow said, 214, coin family Bible 1890 or thereabouts, some correspondence with it. Nice old binding. Who give me 50? I gave him 50. A woman 2 rows up gave him 60, and I understood immediately that I was in trouble. She was a genealogy person. There are 2 or 3 at every sale up here, and a Bible with a family record page and loose correspondence is exactly what they come for. She went to 100. I went to 125. She went to 200, and the room started paying attention. A family Bible does not go to $200, and in a grange-hall, the entertainment is the moment something stops making sense. I took it to 400. She took it to 6. I was not thinking clearly, and I am not going to claim I was. I was raising a paddle in a room where my mother sat 7 rows in front of me, wondering what had got into Nell. At 800, my sister turned around in her seat and looked at me. At 1,000, the genealogy woman looked at me too for a good while. Then she gave her head the small shake people give when they have decided you are unwell, and she bid 1,100. And that was the number. That was my number. I had $1,100 and she was already standing on it. Pearly Dow said, 1,100. 1,100 once. And my sister stood up. I want to be precise, because I have had to explain it about 30 times since. Corinne did not do it for me. She did not know one thing. She stood up and she said, Pearly, that's a family Bible. That shouldn't be in a public sale. That's got a family record page in it. Amos didn't have anybody, but that's not, you don't sell those. And 2 or 3 people said that's right. And Pearly Dow, who has run this sale for 22 years and knows exactly what a room wants, put his hand flat on the podium and said, You know what, Corinne? You're right. I'll square it with the executor. That comes out. He picked it up off the table. He came down the 2 steps off the podium and handed it to my mother because my mother was the closest thing in that room to Amos Coyne's family. I was 7 rows back. There was nothing on this earth I could do. My mother put her pocketbook on the floor and opened that Bible on her lap to the family record page. That is what she had just been told was in it. That is what a woman of 71 in this town does with an old Bible. And a folded piece of paper came out of the back and went onto the floor by her shoe. Royce picked it up. He was the one standing nearest. He unfolded it to see whether it mattered, because that is what a person does. He read about 4 words of it. And then my brother's face did something I have never seen it do. He said, "Mom." And then he said, "Don't," which is, of course, the only thing on earth that guarantees she will. My mother read it in a grange-hall on the 25th of October with 100 people finding their coats. She read it twice. I watched from 7 rows back, and I did not go up there. I think I had spent 14 years not going up there. Then she turned around and looked for me and found me and said my name across a room full of people. She said, "Nellie, what is this?" I said, "It's what it says it is." Corinne took it out of her hand and read it, and my sister's face changed differently than my brother's had. Royce's was grief. Corinne's was arithmetic. She was doing the same sum I had done for 14 years and reaching the end of it in about 4 seconds. She said, "You sold them." And I said yes, and that was my choice. You had that part right. Then I said the only other thing I said in that hall. I said, "Mom, he did what I asked him to. Don't be angry at Amos. He's the only person in this who did exactly what he promised." Here is what came of it, and I am going to be plain because I have no use for a story where somebody gets a feeling instead of an outcome. The division did not get signed. It had been due at the lawyer's office on the Tuesday, and it did not go. When it did go, 3 weeks later, the note at the bottom about 2011 was gone, and my name was in the 3rd column with everybody else's. I am not going to pretend that was the part that mattered. The house had already sold, and the 3 columns were not large. What mattered is that a sentence said about me at every wedding for 14 years got unsaid. Once in the room where this family conducts its business, in front of the people who had been hearing it, Corinne apologized. Once properly standing up in my shop, she did not do a good job of it, and I did not make it easier, and we are both content with how that went. Royce cried in the parking lot, which surprised nobody. My mother did not speak to me for 11 days. I understood it better than anybody expected. She was not angry that I paid it. She was angry that I let her be grateful to somebody else in her own house for 14 years, in front of everybody, and that I sat there and let her. She was right. That is the part of this where I am not the good one. There is one more piece, and it did not land on me until the 2nd week of November. My mother wears a watch. Small, gold-filled, worth nothing, a plain thing, from about 1954, and she has worn it every day since 2011. The story on that one is that Amos brought it round a few weeks afterward and said it had turned up. She calls it the only thing she has of her mother-in-law's. I kept one back. Out of 12 when I laid them on the dealer's velvet in Boston, I kept the cheapest one in the case. I could not stand for my mother to have nothing of it. I put it in a paper bag and gave it to Amos Coyne with the letter and told him to wait a month. She has brought that watch to my bench for a service every 2 years since. I clean it, I oil it properly, I hand it back, and I tell her there is no charge. She says I am good to her, and she goes home. Twice a year to the wedding and funeral story, and every 2 years to my bench with her sleeve pushed up. It is November. My mother is at Marrow House, and it is better than any of us expected. There is a window in her room that gets the afternoon. She talks about Amos differently now, which I did not anticipate and did not want. It has not made her love him less. It has just made him a man who did her a favor by lying instead of a man who saved her, and I would give a good deal to have that back for her. If you have ever kept quiet about something you did for somebody and had it come out sideways in a room at the worst possible moment, I have exactly one thing worth passing on. You do not get to choose when it comes out. You only get to choose whether the version they hear is yours. Mine came out of a dead man's Bible onto a grange-hall floor, and I was 7 rows back, and I have made my peace with that. She still brings the watch in. She brought it in on the 11th. She pushed her sleeve up and put it on the bench mat, as she has since 2011, and she looked at me and she said, "How much do I owe you, Nell?" And I said what I have always said. The bench light is on. There is a movement on the tray tonight with a cracked balance jewel out of a watch a man in Concord wore to work for 30 years. It will run again by Thursday, and he is coming at 4 to collect it. That is the work. There is another one of these where this came from, and I will tell it when the bench is clear.